Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here today on this Friday at 12. We really appreciate all your attendance and participation. This is, again, MPW Strategies, Fundraising in the Coronavirus Era. We're very excited to have Shira Zimmerman with ZIM Consulting on as our special guest. Welcome, Shira. And we'll be talking about foundation grants and also the government grants that exist right now and are available. I'm going to turn it over to Janie with the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Colorado chapter, to get us kicked off. Jump in.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Janie Thompson. For those of you that don't know me, I am the board president of AFP Colorado. We are really thrilled to be hosting this webinar with MPW Strategies. The weekly, I think, check-ins and information have been awesome for our community. So thank you to the MPW team for allowing those to happen and facilitating it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with AFP, we are a membership organization that's committed to advancing philanthropy. So we provide resources similar to this one and opportunities for you to be a better fundraiser. So if you are not familiar with AFP, you can check us out at afpcc.org. You can sign up to be a member or just look at, there's a ton of resources online. And with that, I will turn it back over to the MPW team to lead us on.
Great, thanks so much, Janie. And I also want to give a shout out to Colorado Nonprofit Association, who's another partner with us for these webinars. Another amazing group here in Colorado helping nonprofits. So I hope you will consider joining Colorado Nonprofit Association as a member if you're not already. They provide quite a bit of training and information and resources and tools for nonprofits across the state, doing great work there, as well as AFP. So just as we get started, I want everybody to look at the bottom of their screen. It should be at the bottom of your screen, depending on how you're set up. You'll see the Q&A feature. Please use that Q&A feature instead of the chat feature. With the Q&A feature is where we want you to put your questions and comments. You will have the opportunity to upvote through the Q&A feature. There's a little thumbs up button. So if you like a question or a comment, hit that, and I'll kind of pop them up to the top. And that's kind of how we'll feed our questions today from our audience. Again, we look at these webinars as very participant oriented. So we want your comments, we want your questions. As you hear things today, if your organization's doing something similar or something different, please let us know. Please provide a comment in that Q&A section. So please don't use the chat. We're gonna keep the chat clear when we're really not checking that. If you're having technical issues, we just have too many people on this webinar. We're up to 74, and I think we had over 100. I know we had over 100 registrations. So unfortunately, we just can't help people with technical problems. With that in mind, this will be recorded. We'll send out a recording to all registrants by probably Monday or Tuesday next week. So with no further ado, I'm just going to introduce everyone really quickly. We've got John Pepperdine with MPW Strategies, Kate Alviama with MPW Strategies, and Shira Zimmerman, our special guest with ZIM Consulting. And sure, you say, all right, I was looking at my screen wrong. Apologize. So I am going to start it off. Shira, if you can just, well, we always start these off, and I'll either throw it to Kay or John or Shira. Can you tell us how you're handling things these days? What are you doing to keep busy, to keep grounded, to have a handle on things? We're in the midst of what's supposed to be the worst week right now of the coronavirus crisis.
I'll take it first if that's okay.
Great.
I just
Yeah.
want to first say thanks to Nat and John for putting this on, and AFP and Colorado Nonprofit Association. The three of you guys are all leaders in the community, and thank you so much for putting this together. God, it's so tough. We are busier than we've ever been, and we feel that we and our nonprofit partners, we are the safety net, right? And so we have tons of grants going out constantly. Some of my teammates have 10 grants a week going out, and in the background there's this crazy stuff, and a couple of our teammates have family members who are battling coronavirus right now, we have so many friends and people around us, people, loved ones that are unemployed or have reduced their pay. And so on one hand, we're distracted because we're working hard and we feel like we're doing good in the community. And on the other hand, it's just so much grief and trauma.
Great, thank you, Shira. Thank you. Kay?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to send along heartfelt, warm wishes to your teammates' families that are fighting that battle. My wife she's got several students whose parents are suffering with it as well. So it's tough for sure. And I think it's harder to feel like as we hit that week to start and actually hear stories of it encroaching in our own small bubbles, so to speak. And I know some of the sanity, my mother-in-law and wife are in the backyard playing bocce ball right now, like on Good Friday. She's a devout Episcopalian, and I know it's Passover, and a couple days ago, my family was doing remote sessions, as I believe, Shira, you were saying you were looking forward to do a big one. So I think, there is a blessing in that we are hitting this time period when a lot of us are also entering into moments of deep spirituality and religion and grounding ourselves in that and in family. And I think it's just important to take those deep breaths and remember that the mother of necessity is ingenuity, right? Or whatever that saying is, I can't recall it right now. But through that process, like we are in the necessary moments, and we're all finding these new ways to be innovative with our thinking and really start to respond to the needs in strong ways so that we fill the gaps and plug the holes. So it's an interesting time for sure.
No question, no doubt. And John, how about yourself?
Yeah, I'll just echo kind of everything that Kay and Shira are saying in terms of being concerned for others. And I am, and I don't ever want to appear dismissive of those things, because my nature is usually to try to just plow forward, and that's not always helpful. But I will say this, kind of tagging on what Kay was saying, is that ingenuity is the mother of invention, or something along those lines. I'm mixing my metaphors, but the point is, Matt and I were talking, maybe a few days ago or something. And if the idea of a month ago we would have said, "Hey, let's start a weekly webinar," and that sounds like fun, we would have said, run for the hills. But it's actually, I've enjoyed it. I really appreciate the fact that we can bring on folks like Shira that know what they're talking about, that can share it with others. And it's made me feel a lot better in terms of connecting with folks. So I think the silver lining to the unfortunate circumstance the world is under is that we're finding out that we can do things and connect with others in ways that we would have been dismissive prior. And so I've really enjoyed and appreciated that element, that silver lining of this really difficult circumstance.
Great, thanks, John. Thanks. Great. So just getting back to our webinar and a few things before we start. It's good to put us all into, I think, what's called gallery view instead of grid view. So if you see our boxes and videos, you'll see that little, it looks like Hollywood squares or something, and to put us in gallery view will show all our faces. The other thing is, again, we're all doing this from home, so bear with us. Bandwidth is not that great with schools starting online. A lot of school districts are now in online courses, and that's taken up some bandwidth, among every other thing. So there might be interruptions. At my house, there'll be dogs barking, there'll be kids yelling, and there could be spouses yelling at kids and things like that. So just bear with us. There could be those things in the background. The other thing is, for those that just joined, please use the Q&A feature for discussion. And so we want your comments. If you hear things that you're doing, or you're doing different things, we want to hear from you. Your questions, please provide them in the Q&A. And then the Q&A has this upvote feature. So just, it's a thumbs up, and you can click on that, and that will make things rise to the top. John's gonna curate the questions. So we're gonna start off, and Kay and I are just gonna open it up for questions to Shira. And as we're doing these, think of questions to ask us as a panel. And then we'll open it up for all your questions for the last half an hour of our webinar. But before we begin, Shira, I just want you, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and about ZIM Consulting.
Sure. So I was the failure of the business school. I went to Emory Business School and I had 2 internships, one at Hallmark Marketing and one with the Jewish Federation in Greater Atlanta. And I failed because I chose Jewish Federation over Hallmark. I will tell you, after going into the nonprofit world and then starting a business of my own, they have now come to me and asked me to be a mentor, and they've changed their mind about me completely. So now that I own a business that serves nonprofits, I'm better in their mind. My best job, my favorite job, was being able to run 32 supporting foundations and giving out many hundreds of millions of dollars. So I got to see a lot of really good grant applications, a lot of really bad grant applications. And so when we started ZIM about 13 years ago, we really did focus on grants. About 80% of our business is related to foundations and grants. The other 20% is really strategy. Of course, today we're going to talk about the grants and foundations. We have a team of 15, and just a huge shout out to my teammates. I mean, they are just really unbelievable. Emergency funding has come out, and it's 36-hour time frames of when these grants are due. And so everyone's been up on their toes, especially during this hard time. So we do have 12 grant writers and researchers on our team, and we love what we do.
Great. Thanks, Shira. It sounds there's a lot to love about what you're doing and how you're helping these days. So we'll move to our first question. And so how, Shira, how has the foundation community responded to the crisis? And are there new opportunities to receive emergency grant funding? So if you can talk along those 2 lines.
Sure. So the foundation community really has mobilized quickly. They have opened up new funding sources. Many of it is in addition to what they're already doing. Some of our foundation partners, they have already given out unsolicited donations. So current grantees are receiving grants that were unsolicited, and they just received money in the mail, emergency dollars. So the foundations have been not only giving their own money to current grantees, they've opened up funds themselves. I'll go through a couple of them. And then also they've been giving to the larger statewide funds, which really has been amazing. So just a couple, and I think a lot of the people who are on have seen a lot of these come out, but the Colorado Relief Fund, their first deadline was last week. They are going to have 5 deadlines. The next one is next Saturday. And that's really all inclusive. It's $25,000 in general operating support. It's a great new opportunity for organizations. The Denver Foundation just came out this week with an emergency opportunity. Next 50 came out a couple of weeks ago for emergency services for those over the age of 50. Not only that, we've also seen our foundations, we've seen them come out with food. They're providing emergency food. They're coming out as volunteers. They're providing PPE equipment. I mean, it's been unbelievable. They've gone above and beyond they know they're the safety net for us. And they've really taken their job seriously. We're excited about how they've responded so far.
Terrific. It is. It's really enlightening to see. As you mentioned, the Colorado Relief Fund from the governor and all the foundations and philanthropists that have given to that fund and the opportunities that exist there. The Denver Foundation that you mentioned, Next 50, and there's so many others. So it's really enlightening to see all the response of foundations to what's happening in Colorado. I think you're on mute, Kay.
Too many things. All right, sorry. So kind of along the same lines, but in a slightly different track. If an organization doesn't actually qualify for some of the new funding opportunities, how can they actually go about securing emergency funding to replace program revenue or fundraising returns?
Yeah, so a lot of the advice we're giving is to really reach out to the foundations that you already have relationships with. And so if you're not providing direct services for COVID, and you're not eligible for some of these new funds, reach out to your major foundation funders. They have been very lenient about program restricted grants being able to become unrestricted grants. Also, some of them do have some funding that's available to be able to augment what you already have. One of the things that we've all talked about a little bit over the last week is really this idea of the SBA PPP loan. I feel like I've become an expert over this over the last week or 10 days or so. Not a lender, not a tax accountant. However, this is the single largest grant for a lot of our clients, right? It is 2.5 times your average payroll. And so if you don't qualify for some of the other emergency opportunities, really applying for this application is almost a grant. Be in touch with your lenders. I know it's an awkward process, this first come, first serve, and every bank is doing it differently, but we are seeing it as a 7-figure grant, really, for a lot of our organizations. Also, last thing is really keep tabs on some of these opportunities. So some of the foundations mobilized quickly, and they are addressing emergency needs, right? So emergency food, emergency health, emergency PPE, like all of that is emergency needs right away. However, some of them are doing a little bit more in stages. And so it's possible that in the first stage, they did emergency funding for basic needs. But in the second stage, they are going to recognize that there's just general operating dollars to be able to make sure our nonprofit community gets through this.
It's great, Shira. Shira, could you go a little more in there's so much activity with the SBA and we're seeing so many things. What is available right now for nonprofits? And there's some limits there too, in terms of size and things like that, right?
Yes, there are. So again, I feel like I've become an expert, but really my expertise does lie in grants and foundations, but I'll go a little bit through this and maybe in your Q&A people will correct me. But the Paycheck Protection Program is the one that most of our clients are applying for. It is up to $10 million, but again, 2.5 times your average payroll. So if your payroll was $100,000 on average, you would be eligible for $250,000 up to $10 million. If you use those funds primarily to keep your employees employed, right? That's the whole goal of it, is that the employees don't go for unemployment dollars, that they stay employed with your organization. If you keep them employed, you will be able to have that loan forgiven. Again, this changes every day, and really the banks struggled to roll it out. Some of the banks did better than other banks. Some of the smaller community banks did really well. And what we're seeing is we have seen some of our clients already be funded. I know that there's some anxiety about maybe you didn't get in first or maybe your bank didn't get in first. I do have hope and faith that the government is going to be able to give out more money towards the PPP program. And so there will be more dollars available. But yeah, that would be number one. The second is that the SBA is also providing loans and some employee match programs. If you retain your employees, they will match that dollar for dollar. The loans for nonprofits is a whole percentage point less than for-profit businesses. So for-profit businesses, those loans are at 3.75%. For nonprofits, they are 2.75%. And so there are some other opportunities also. The biggest thing that we say, a lot of the board members that are on our nonprofit boards, they work at banks, right? And they are lenders and they can connect you to other lenders. And really being in touch with your bank on a regular basis. I think I called my bank so many times just to understand the rules, right? And to the point where I told them I owed them a virtual gift basket. I told them that I can get intense sometimes and that perhaps this time wasn't the most helpful for them, but really being in touch with your bank regularly, that I think is what's helping people a lot.
Great advice. Be in touch with your bank. And I found that with our clients, working through the bank is really helpful because they understand the options. And then it's a lot of capital, and it sounds like you feel this is not gonna, there's a lot of fear it'll dry up, but it sounds that it's here and there should be enough to go around.
I don't know if there'll be enough to go around, but I think that I think they want us to keep our employees employed. Yeah. They do not want nonprofits to go out of business for a public health crisis. That's not right. The unemployment numbers scares everybody. When the unemployment numbers get as high as they're getting right now, that scares everyone. So the more they can keep the employees employed, I think that's what they want to do.
Great. So on to our third question, should organizations continue to apply for their ongoing grants right now?
Yes, so this is a resounding yes, 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 yes. You should be applying for your ongoing grants. I know that you're distracted with lots of things and your clients need a lot more support right now, but yes, you have to be applying for these grants. Some of the foundations, you know, they still have regular deadlines. They are still treating life as if July, August, September, October are going to be back to almost whatever normal is going to look like. And you don't want to be stuck in a position where July, August, September, October comes along and all of a sudden you didn't apply for those dollars aren't available to you anymore. So yes, absolutely, continue doing what you're doing. Make sure that those grant applications and those grant reports that are due get in on time. There will be some leniency if you say to a foundation, hey, we're really serving, you know, hunger needs in our community and I can't fill out that report right now. I think most of them will be lenient with you. They'll understand that, but get that application in, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that a lot of the reporting tours, or would have been personal visits now, are moving to Zoom or other virtual personal visits.
And it's very fun when you see your favorite program officer, all of a sudden their cat is on your computer screen. That's generally a good sign. It just makes us all a little bit more patient with each other and a little more human with each other.
More human. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to cue you up for a toughie, Shira. So, is it possible, the $25,000 question, is it possible and or advised to cultivate new foundation relationships during this crisis?
So you're absolutely right, Kay. Like, this is the hardest question we get every single day. And the answer is, it depends. If you are on the front lines and you are serving emergency needs, emergency health needs, emergency food needs, emergency older adult needs, then yeah, I think it's okay. It's an okay time to call a foundation and say, look, we haven't had a relationship before, but your mission and your priorities and our mission are in complete alignment. We want to be doing what you want to be doing. And so we wanted to introduce ourselves to you. So in those cases, yes, I think that it is possible. I also think it's possible to, you know, if there's a board member that didn't want before to make a connection to a foundation for you, and now all of a sudden maybe feels more comfortable, right? You had to postpone your event and now the revenue is not coming in from that. The board member might be more comfortable making an introduction to a foundation for you. I would be prepared though, and you always have to be prepared for this, but now even more so, is that the program officer either may not call you back, or they may say, hey, you know what, we're really dealing with our current grantees. We're interested in what you're doing, but really right now is not the best time to come to us. And I don't think you can take that personally. You know, sometimes maybe you take it personally, but not right now. And really understand where they're coming from as well.
Great, thanks, Shira. That's good advice. And it, like all fundraising and all grant making, if there's a connection, if there's a fit, it's certainly the time with this crisis and emergency to cultivate those new relationships and have patience. It sounds like also the big takeaway as well. We're going to move. I think that was our last question. Yeah. So we're going to move into overall questions from our attendees. So please get your questions fired up here. Use that Q&A feature. So you can post your questions and your comments in the Q&A. Keep them going. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're doing in terms of granting and working with foundations during this time. And then the questions that you might have. So this is just as you get your questions fired up, I just want to let you know a little preview into what we have coming up through April. Our next sessions with Laura Larson of Stride Community Health, and that'll be more along the lines of frontline fundraising. I mean, front lines in this healthcare crisis, and Stride is certainly on the front lines. And then Jen Darling with the CEO of the Colorado Children's Hospital Foundation, again, healthcare focus there. So two great guests coming up in the next 2 weeks. Please register. You can use that link. And they'll probably have some in May. So we're getting our list together for May. So if you have any ideas or there's themes or things you want to hear about in the coming weeks, please let us know. We're looking for ideas for these webinars. So please, you can just write to us at MPW Strategies. The last thing is our or you can post on our Facebook group, and that's down the corner, left-hand corner, our Facebook group there for these webinars. So please join us there and comment there. So I'm going to hand it over to John, who's getting all these questions together for us.
Oh, thanks, Matt. So we've got some really good questions. I'm going to start off with one because I owe it to Mike, because I answered it and moved over to answered and nobody could upvote it. So anyway, I'll jump right into it. Mike is with a 501c6, which is slightly different. And he's wondering, he needs to ask for money now for obvious reasons, but he's finding that a lot of his folks are a little reticent to be paying invoices and so forth. And we were talking with AFP earlier about memberships being down. So yeah, people are already kind of cost conscious and trimming down and all that good stuff. So is it going to be impossible for him to ask for support from funders? How possible is it with his own memberships down? This may be, I'm not sure who'd want to field this question. Certainly Matt, Shira, Kay, does anybody want to volunteer to answer this one? It's a little tough one.
I'll go first if that's so. 501c6 membership organizations have a hard time sometimes receiving foundation funding in a normal day, right? They're probably having a much harder time now. And so I would think that the people who have been sponsors for your organization, people who want to get their name out there right now, there are a lot of people who did receive PPP funding and now feel that they're in a little bit more of a stable position. I think as that starts coming out, we'll start seeing people feel a little bit more stable and being able to join 501c6 organizations, including AFP. Those are still important organizations to be a part of, and I think foundation funding might be harder. It's harder always, and I think that maybe some companies might be able to do it through marketing dollars.
Matt, Kay, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's no question. It's with membership at this point, be a membership organization, it is a tough time. It's always tough to get grant funding. I think there are those opportunities out there. It depends on it's mission driven, and how does that mission connect with what's taking place at this time. And then if it doesn't directly, there are those SBA opportunities as well, which are just, as we said, about keeping people employed and keeping an organization afloat. And I would definitely look into those, because that's for pretty much any organization, not necessarily frontlines mission specific.
Hey, you have anything to add? All right, let me jump into Lauren's question. It's been upvoted, so congrats, Lauren. You've won. She has a really good one. Matt and I actually were on a training this morning, and this was popping up time and time again. So I think this is a really astute question. How can we navigate the delicate balance between emergency funds and the need to continue programs in the future? That's a tension, and I'm going to throw that actually to Kay, only because she was in the thick of it years ago, and I think you might be able to give some insight, being a leader of a school at the time, but also and we face this with clients. It's that short-term emergency versus long-term.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that, John. the wheels of that bus left some skid marks on my back, but that's good. Appreciate your vote of confidence. Yeah, so for some context, for those of you who are new to this webinar series and perhaps haven't joined before, my prior life, I was an executive director of a charter school, and spent a lot of time in the trenches of trying to build a program from the ground up and just kind of keep it limping along, because that's unfortunately the charter school reality these days. So I think actually it is a question that I have a lot of experience with, that balance of needing emergency funds and then prioritizing continued programming, and how do you get everything to line up in a way that makes the most sense, that also doesn't make you and your organization come across. And I think this is a slightly different reality because we're all in COVID-19 together. So, for me, it was balancing that messaging as well, Like, we're not falling apart, but we do have some serious needs right now. So it's a lot of choosing the relationships, choosing the organizations you're going to go to seek and solicit funding from. And I think this comes back to Shira's question or response to cultivating new relationships. And I think the reality is a lot of our foundations right now are hunkered down with the people they know and support. And so I think that applies here too. Like the people you know and you have a relationship with, you can kind of in some senses be incredibly vulnerable about where you are and the reality because there is that stable relationship underneath. And then it's also balancing against the future vision, which you know you're going to have to grow into. So being aware of what your need is now and staying focused on that while also keeping in the back of your head how you're going to get and reach out for your future growth and trajectory. And anybody else, please feel free to jump in and add on to that.
Shira, I'm sure you've got clients the same boat. Would you want to share some thoughts?
Sure, absolutely. And I completely agree with Kay. I mean, it's one of those where a lot of our organizations are doing multiple asks at the same time. And a lot of organizations have experience with that, doing capital campaigns or emergency campaigns, right? There's lots of times where we have done multiple asks at the same time. And so kind of have the ship needs to keep going. And in addition to the ship that needs to keep going, we have so much more need, right? And everything changed in a minute. And so we have to acknowledge that, and the foundations know that that's true. That's why a lot of these foundations really just sent out checks at the beginning. They understood that, yeah, we need our regular $50,000 operating support, and we also do need some more right now. And I think it's how that messaging, just what they said, that messaging out there, we are grateful for what you do for us every year. And this year, I've seen so many articles about how foundations and other large donors are dipping into corpus this year, right? They're dipping into the principal different than they've done in the past, right? Generally giving out 5% or whatever it is that they've chosen, either average over a few years. But this year, they know things are different. It's a different situation. We're going to dip into principal, and then at some point, we're going to make it back up.
Matt, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think, Kay and Shira pretty much covered it all. The only thing I can add is that, and this kind of relates to it, I think everybody wants to see everything, stay afloat. And it's kind of this first phase is let's make sure everybody, is working and people are staying employed and there's money flowing in just for organizations to survive. I think the next point is probably that stabilization. And I think we'll be seeing kind of more of that stabilization in the next few months and how foundations can jump in kind of for that ongoing program support. That's probably around the corner. It will be tough. These are going to be really tough times. But I know like our foundation community is committed to helping nonprofits achieve missions and continue to do impact.
Absolutely. This next question is actually from Nancy. It's a few questions, but I want to, Matt, I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm going to send this one your way because it's right up your wheelhouse. No, this is a really good question. So Nancy asks, what impact is the stock market going to have on funding ability? And I think you'd be good because of your background in business and business fundraising, but also just, you have the crystal ball, Matt. I know you know what's going to happen in 6 months.
Yeah, Sheriff might know more than me on this, but the market is up. The market's been up the last couple of days after being down. Everybody is saying it will go down again. Some people are budgeting for a 50% decrease from the high of 30. That means foundations are going to take a huge hit in what they have. As Shira mentioned, they are going into their corpus. They are providing funds beyond, what they traditionally do. It will be tough. I think we can expect that foundation funding, and I mentioned, these two phases of this, which is this, like, let's just get funding into the streets and help organizations survive. If there's a second phase of stability, we're in a bad recession. Like all recessions, funding will decrease, but, I think there's probably some bright lights there. In terms of meeting missions, and if you really, finding those foundations that really want to support the work you're doing and getting heavily focused with those foundations.
Shira, Kay, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
The only thing I would add to what Matt says is that because of so much uncertainty, that's one of the reasons why we're telling people to apply to foundations now. Make sure you do have your regular applications, because if they do figure out how much they're going to give away based on December 31st numbers, we don't know what those are going to be, right? They may be back to where they were. I hope they're going to be back to where they were. But if they were making it today, it would be a whole lot less. And that would mean reductions to the nonprofit organizations that they fund. And so that's another reason why we're really telling people, get your applications in this year, make sure that you're getting that ongoing funding, because next year might be a different challenge.
Yeah, I would just add to that, 2008, we saw a lot of this retrenchment of foundations. And quite frankly, I had quite a few foundations I was on a campus where they had hundreds, not millions of dollars in commitments they had to pull back from, and they just simply couldn't fulfill. So there's going to be that possibility. I wouldn't let that deter you. Just keep in the back of your head. I think that's the best you can do. I want to get the next question, which I think really would be really good for Shira to answer. It's Larry's question about, can organizations apply multiple times for SBA loan and additional expenses have been added to qualify, meaning funding for contractors and so forth. Shira, do you have any thoughts on that you could help answer?
So I haven't heard about multiple times we could apply. There are different funds that you can apply for, but I haven't heard that you can apply for PPP multiple times. If this does continue the way it is right now, I could imagine that they may choose to do that. Remind me the second part, Jeff.
Yeah, the second part was funding for contractors and so forth.
Very good. So very important. So an organization cannot apply for funding for their independent contractors. However, starting, I think it is today, independent contractors can apply for themselves. And this is a big change from what we've seen before from SBA. And so no, you as an organization can't apply for your contractors. You can't count it in your payroll of the number that you were able to give to the PPA application, but those individuals can apply for themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding, I haven't heard funding for multiple times either. And in fact, there's an issue if you apply for paycheck program protection and you use use the economic, it's EIDL, I can't remember the acronym, disaster loan for paying employees, then you're kind of double dipping, and that will get you cross with the SBA in some form or manner. I'm not providing tax or accounting or any kind of legal advice here. It's just my understanding. But there are 4 or 5 different SBA types of loans, and I think they're all worth looking at. And 2 of them are grant. Well, one's a bridge loan of $25,000 within the PPP, and the other is a $10,000 outright grant within the disaster loan. So I think those are all worth looking into. SBDC, Downtown Denver Partnership, Denver Metro Chamber with the SBDC are providing a ton of information right now on these loans. So they have a lot of people just standing by that can help. Colorado Nonprofit Association put out a report on these loans as well. So that could be helpful.
And I'll do a plug for Colorado Nonprofit Association and Association of Fundraising Professionals. Getting back to kind of earlier questions about the values of associations. And I think what Mike had asked Mike had asked earlier about, I would say this is precisely it: information exchange, quick, and so take advantage of Colorado Nonprofit Association, ANFP, and what they're sending out. Subscribe, and more importantly, join as members so they can keep doing what they do. The other note I was going to say on the loans, I think what's going to happen, and what I'm hearing, is that there probably will be tranches where you'll be able to reapply for payroll protection, like Shira was saying, in a month or 2. So that's a distinct possibility. Let's see, I'm going to go to the next question here from Julia. This is a good one about support for international organizations. We're a Denver headquartered international NGO that supports farmers in the Philippines, essential, but it seems most foundations are not looking internationally. Shira, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't have a lot of experience with emergency grants for international organizations. I have seen a lot of them on the news and getting a lot of PR. Project PR has been really out there in front. They did both mobilize and pivot and get some good information out there. And so really, I don't know the answer to that. I can imagine that right now we are focused locally, statewide, I'd say locally and then statewide and then nationally. I think that might be an obstacle, but again, foundations that you've had relationships with before, organizations know that the Philippines is also going to need help, but I think that's going to be hard right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a difficult haul. I'm not familiar either with any foundations doing international emergency grants at this point. But there might be. I mean, farmers in the Philippines. There could be some. I'd look at the current support base and see if there's anything there, and look deeply at it, even like the last 5 years. If a foundation or family foundations as well, there might be some family foundations that would be interested in that area.
Great. I hope everybody can hear my dog whining at the door. I'm going to put a doggy door in my bedroom so my dog can have free access between these. Anyway, we have a really good question from Julie. And she asked, I've heard of some foundations requesting funds back if the goals can't be met as originally set out in the grant. How widespread is the rescinding of funds? How can nonprofits best manage messaging around this? I'm going to start this off and then punt it over to Shira because there's a little bit of replay from 2008, but I will say this, in the last few weeks, I've been very impressed with how foundations are incredibly accommodating and appreciate the circumstances that nonprofits are going in. You can look at Colorado Health Foundation, you can look at Daniels Fund, you can look at Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And so I will just kind of start off with being pleasantly surprised that I think foundations are far more astute. I didn't feel this in 2008, certainly. I think a lot of them were just being at least that's what I feel, but maybe Shira, you're hearing differently.
Yeah, no, John, I'm hearing the exact same thing. I haven't heard of foundations across the board rescinding dollars because you can't meet the goals. In fact, I'm hearing foundations really come out and saying, let's unrestrict those program grants. We get that you might not be able to do a production that you thought you were going to be able to do, and that now you have to do that virtually, and that might have saved you costs, but most likely those costs went to payroll anyway. And so to fund people and performers. And so I don't see a lot of people rescinding. I don't think that that's a fear at this moment. I don't see that as an issue.
Yeah, and I would add, I don't see it either, and I think it's the opposite. I think there's a lot of leeway right now, and a lot of generosity out there. Just to understand, looking at the crisis and understanding the crisis.
But that being said, I'm going to jump in real quick. Julie, if you're having issues or concerns around, like if this is something you're experiencing from one of the foundations you work with, definitely feel free to put more in the Q&A box, reach out to us through Facebook. We're happy to be thought partners with you around best managing messaging for sure, because that's a tricky situation to be in. Totally appreciate that.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So Kay, stay on the line because I think we can wrap up with this last question.
Yeah.
I always want to be respectful of time with everyone, but I really like this question from Tricia because I'm dealing with this with a particular client, and Kay and Matt maybe as well, and I'm probably Shira too.
Yeah.
This question about school programming. Tricia asked, our school programming has changed to virtual at a much lower fee. So is there funding for dance programs and it might have just been upwards for dance programs for students at home? I think that's just one element. You can say other extracurricular, extra things like that. So I don't know, Kay, if you want to start us off with answering that, and then Shira and Matt jump in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the schools that Matt and I have been working with presently, we're actually more focused on getting them going virtually and getting those buckets shored up for them. So Tricia, it's amazing that your programming has changed and it's a lower fee. That's fabulous. And that's what we'd hope to see across schools, is like this shift as it gets in, as it comes in, actually starts to bring some expenses lower than anticipated. So if you're looking for opportunities for funding, I think I believe that there probably would be out there. I know there are so many alternative resources that exist that have popped up, like different creativity camps. So different than perhaps what you're asking for around specific funding related to a dance program that's online. I think it's about researching what experiences and opportunities have popped up to like fill the gap for multitudes of kids across the country, because that's actually what I'm finding, is that there is a lot of and I thought of the correct phrasing: necessity is the mother of invention. That's what the correct phrasing is. So I think there's a lot, like there's one that Kristen Bell and Dak Shepard have just put together that's a creativity camp that they're providing access to for a bunch of kids. Again, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Tricia. Happy to continue the dialogue with you on Facebook. But Matt, definitely, and Shira, jump in.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Kay, there's quite a bit of funding out there for distance learning right now, and for technological delivery of education. The COVID relief fund of the governor's office, that's one of the pieces. And there are some other specifics to that fund. I don't know if it would cover a dance program, and Shira, you might be able to answer that. But you do have to be serving underserved populations, high diverse populations. So that could be a good fit.
So just one last thing from Ken, that there are some funds right now that are available for technology, and I'm going to find those for you. I need to remember what they are, but be able to do things remotely. It's been amazing to me how many organizations have been able to pivot, right, and be able to say, no, we can't do it the way we've done it, but we did it quickly in a whole new way. Education, performing arts, everything. I mean, I've just been so amazed with all of it. And I think it was Verizon, now I'm remembering, Verizon came out with a new opportunity to make sure that that technology exists so that people could be doing more remote.
I want to wrap this up with a final question, everyone, just to impart some knowledge, and also to thank you, Shira, for your expertise and ZIM Consulting's expertise. But if you can leave those listening with some parting words of advice or just something to remember, whoever wants to start that off, I won't call anyone out, but just a minute or two of what you can impart to folks that they can remember from this webinar that could help them.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah, I was gonna pick you, Matt. I love picking on you. So
yeah, yes, you do. So opportunities now. We have these webinars about individual giving, the last two. That's kind of been the focus. And is it okay to ask people for money right now? There's a lot of people out there that want to make a difference and want to change what's happening and make impact. And they know they can do that by giving through your organization. So I think it's critical to be asking right now, especially if your organization can provide direct impact. And if you don't think it can, I bet it can. I bet there's a place there that you are making impact and making our lives better during this crisis. And it's important to offer that opportunity of giving. And what I'm also hearing is, for foundations, it's also critical now. Foundations are getting a lot of money out right now, a lot of capital out on the streets. And it's important to get in front of that. And I think, with some due diligence, some research, you can figure out the best fits. I highly recommend these SBA fundings if you're a fit. As we mentioned, they may forgive some of these payments, and there's actually grants, a couple grants embedded in those loans as well. So that's go forth.
I guess I'll go second. Okay. So I think, in general, our nonprofit community and our foundation community is extremely generous, and we're all good friends with each other, and we all know that we're wanting to do good. And in this situation, I've seen it even more. And I think that's just being a little bit more patient with one another and a little bit more understanding that there's so much going on in a lot of people's organizations and their families and their lives, right? And that really everybody stepped up. I'm so amazed with our community, just mobilizing. I can't believe my kids are still learning right now, right? I mean, and we're able to still do our work. And we had a Passover Seder online last night. Like how crazy are some of these things that we've been able to accomplish? And so I think our foundation funders have been generous, and I think they're even more generous now.
Yeah, I agree with, echo everything Matt and Shira have said. And I think the only thing that I'd do is draw a line under the through line of patience. Like you know, we're what, three or 4 weeks. I've lost track of time like into this now. And I think with each passing week, we become more adept at dealing with the current reality. And if we're doing that, so are the foundation, so are our partners, so are the individuals we support. So I think the key is take a deep breath, exhale, and just ease into the process and give everyone that same space as well. Give grace, right? Like that's just what we need to do and show up for each other, because we will get there. We'll get through this and we'll figure it out, and we're going to do it together.
Okay, you've inspired me. I'm going to cut Matt a little bit more slack and be a little more forgiving to him. So you've convinced me. I will, before I hand it off to Matt for him to slam me, I am going to add something to this. So I started off, you know, my fundraising career in college doing community development block grant funding, which, you know, can be a little boring. But what I quickly learned is, yes, it was number crunching. It was dealing with the federal government, the local, and all that. It was amazing how people oriented it is. And that you talk to that person. Most people in this world want to help you. And if you're working with a big foundation, a small foundation, whatever, really take time to get to know the development officers, the program officers, I should say. Yes, do your homework, read what their mission is, you know, be respectful of their time, and especially now, but also don't be so hesitant that you don't just give them a call, you know, and every foundation can be different. Some of them just say, just give us a call. We'll get through this quickly and maybe we're not a right fit. So I would leave some parting advice is that always still treat this as a relationship, and, you know, find that person, that contact, and build that relationship with that foundation. And I think it'll pay dividends. And we will get through COVID, and, you know, who knows how long it'll take, but we'll get that point, and you'll have that relationship established to where you can maybe get through COVID funding and into increasing your program or reaching more people or helping more people. So anyway, Matt, you want to take it over?
Yeah, sure. And before we part, Emily I saw Emily has a comment or question. I guess it's more of a comment here, but it's a really good comment about it would be great to see an association or foundations bundling or organizing these opportunities into some type of chart. There's so many opportunities out there that focus on telehealth or direct patient care or general operating, and it's overwhelming. It is. There's so much. There's so many opportunities out there. So I think Emily, that's a great idea. I don't know, Shira, you all at ZIM might be doing something along those lines, or.
Yeah, we have been keeping a list updated, and we do it by, I think we've been doing weekly updates to our clients for 3 weeks now. The newsletter, we did get some feedback like, why aren't you sharing this widely? And so in our newsletter this past week, we did have an opt-in feature. So if anybody wants to be part of that, we have been keeping track. I think right now it is still a lot of information, but we're keeping track of it by time that it's, so like Denver Foundation that just came out this week will be at the top of the list, so that you're aware of which are the new opportunities and which are the ongoing opportunities. And so we have made that available. You just have to opt in, and we'll make sure that you're on the list. It goes out on Mondays because a lot of the open opportunities seem to come out on Fridays. We had been sending out those emails on Fridays, and then immediately after we sent it out, we'd have something that we wish we would have added. So we've moved it to Monday.
All right, so check out Zim's site, get on the newsletter list, opt in to receive those on Mondays. That's a great resource. Thank you for providing that, Shira. I am going to hand it over to Janie, if she's still on the line, just to give the close for AFP. And there you are. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a wonderful weekend. Happy Easter, happy Passover, and everybody take care and be safe and be healthy.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Just before you all log out, I wanted to remind you of 2 upcoming AFP opportunities. The first is a virtual events webinar with Debbie Roth-Bush. That is Tuesday, April 14th from 12 to 1 p.m. And it'll be an opportunity for you to learn the ins and outs of taking your event virtual, which many of us will have to consider doing. Again, that's April 14th, virtual events webinar. And then AFP is also hosting a virtual happy hour on May 6th at 4:30 p.m. And the topic for this happy hour will be, your board can become a top-notch fundraising team and it will be hosted by Ann Goldman and Leslie Allen. And they'll be teaching us how to mobilize our board members to their fullest potential. So May 6th, virtual happy hour, April 14th, webinar with Debbie Rothbush. And thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you. Thanks to our partners for these webinar series, AFP Colorado and the Colorado Nonprofit Association. Thank you, Shira, for joining us as a special guest. Learned some great things, great advice and information and guidance on foundation grants. Everybody, we'll see you. Have a terrific weekend. Goodbye.